Everybody smiles in the same language. A smile, let your light come shining through.
Welcome to the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow podcast. I'm Sandra M., coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico, the land of enchantment. I interview people from all parts of the world about what happiness means to them. What are they in love with? In each episode, we'll give you a key to happiness to include in your life. And of course, we'll play a happy tune from my live Celebrate Happiness Roadshow.
A smile doesn't cost you anything.
Today we're talking with Brett Trusko, a dynamic thought leader whose career spans academia, consulting, finance, technology, writing, and innovation, and whose insights challenge conventional wisdom, proving that structured processes can drive breakthrough success without sacrificing efficiency. Whether in the corporate world or the classroom, his expertise and forward-thinking approach make him a compelling voice in business and technology. Brett began his career in the accounting firm of Coopers Lybrand, where he earned his CPA before working as the CFO at a major Seattle hospital. His leadership skills and strategic mindset propelled him into 25 years of global consulting, where he became the managing director of the quality and excellence practice at BearingPoint. After which Brett transitioned into academia, focusing on medical informatics, technology management, and innovation. Currently an associate professor at the University of New Mexico, he has also held faculty positions at Symbiosis Institute for Business Management in India, the Mayo College of Medicine, Houston Baptist University, Texas A&M University, New York University, and Mount Sinai College of Medicine. Dr. Trusko is the president and CEO of Propertyhero.ai, a cutting-edge technology company, and is a renowned author who has written many books on quality and innovation, including the award-winning Global Innovation Science Handbook. While finishing his first novel, Brett is currently the editor of Santa Fe, New Mexico's Trend magazine, Art, Design, and Culture. Welcome, Brett, to the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow, and I am so excited to talk to you about happiness and how it manifests in your personal and your professional life.
Well, thank you, Sandra. I'm happy to be here, and I'll let you lead me where we need to go, because if I just started talking, I'd probably go all day long.
Well, one of the exciting parts of your intro for me was the whole concept of innovation, because to me, when I'm on purpose and I'm coming up creating something new, to me that is a kind of innovation. And when I'm creating, I feel very connected to something bigger than myself that maybe I don't even know that much about, but I'm finding more and more about it, and it just makes me very happy to be connected when I'm creating. So how about that? Let's start with innovation.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that one of the things that I find particularly joyful in my life is learning. And part of that is that I'm interested in a number of things. A true life thing right now is I'm having my front door refurbished. I've got a 125-year-old house, which could cause a lot of grief for a lot of people, which it does periodically. But the guy at the front that's redoing my front door says, you know, I really like working for you because you actually care about what I'm doing. You're interested. You can hold a screwdriver for me. You know how things work. When I tell you I'm going to do this or that or the other, he goes, how did you learn this stuff? And my wife even asks me that all the time. How do you know how to do this? And how do you know how to do that? And I go, well, because it makes me happy to learn to do new things that I didn't know how to do before. And from the innovation perspective, why that really is kind of neat is because I think that finding solutions to problems makes me particularly happy. It's to just hire someone to do all my work is just kind of it just isn't exciting to me. Figuring out how to do it myself, and that's one of the neat things about having like the internet is I have the opportunity to go in there and see how things should be done. And I can't tell you how many times from the innovation perspective, I go ahead and invent a new way to do it. So that's been part of my career. I've published a number of books on innovation, and I have traveled all over the world to work with small companies, large companies, to help them solve problems that they thought weren't solvable. And it just brings me a lot of joy to help people like that.
So one of the things I happen to really love are mysteries. I will watch almost any mystery, especially on PBS, and it seems to me that solving problems it's always a mystery, right? And so how it requires that you pay a lot of attention to specifics and see how they all go together. Am I on the right track with you? Is that what turns you on about solving problems?
You are, and my wife would tell you that I'm what they call a polymath. If you're not familiar with that term, the non-PC version of polymath is a Renaissance man. And one of the things that I think, so let me tell you a little bit about my career, not to inform you of my career, but to tell you all the different things I've done, which in today's world confuses people to no end. My mother was a hospital administrator. I started as a volunteer. I became a janitor, surgical scrub tech, phlebotomist. I did everything in the hospital. I was the hospital equivalent of a gym rat because I was always in the hospital doing something. Got a biology degree. While I was applying for medical school, got an accounting degree. Found out that accountants make money right away versus physicians have to, go through all the training and stuff. So I became a hospital CFO and did the accounting, but what was neat was I also knew the operations of the hospital because I had spent so much time in there. So when people came to me with their budget requests and stuff, I'd say, no, that's not how that works because I know how the hospital works, maybe better than you do. Then got a master's degree in marketing and became a futurist. So I actually would predict the future 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. And I mostly worked in the healthcare industry, but not entirely. And then founded a software company during the dot-com period. And then went back to big consulting and got into process reengineering. So something I had never done before, and it wasn't just for healthcare. I had done work for a number of major companies all over the world on how to get things done in a better way. I used something called statistical process control because that really fit into me being a numbers guy and accountant. But at one point, my wife and I were both traveling too much. The kids were young, and one of us had to get off the road. By that time, I had a couple of PhDs because I really like to learn, and I like to be at the university. And I thought, hey, I can be a professor, and I can learn the rest of my life, spend the rest of my life at the university. So I switched over to, of all places, being a professor at Mayo Clinic. Well, my PhDs were in business and computer science. So I found a way to make my business and computer science degrees work in medicine as doing analysis and stuff, because that gave me the opportunity to look for really cool things like patterns in diseases and, related to ethnicity or males, females, or, whatever. So I always got that thrill out of learning new things, and that fed that because it gave me the chance to find out. And I got the greatest joy I got in that job was when I would get a bunch of medical experts on the phone, and I'd say, "Do you ever notice?" And they'd say, "Well, now that you come to mention it, yes, all of my patients that have that disease fit that profile," because I had discovered it on the computer. And so it was just fun. It was a lot of fun doing that. And then I started writing books on innovation and became this world expert on innovation. And I get to travel the world and give speeches and try to work with companies on how to be more creative. And that's how this all became. So I've done, so a lot of people would say, well, you've done 5 careers in 35 years. Yes, I have. And I've enjoyed the transitions on all of them. I think I'd be bored to death if I only did one thing.
So you mentioned a couple of things that I think would be really interesting for our listeners. One is you're a futurist. So way back in the day, I used to follow Barbara Marx Hubbard. I don't know if you know that name or not. She, I think, at one time ran for the vice president of the United States, but she was considered a futurist. And she talked a lot about the fact that we are in the 6th mass extinction at this point. And we are now going to go, either we're going to have more compassion, more a sense of collective humanity. Well, she basically said we have to go into our love base. We have to start understanding that we're all one humanity, etc. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that and if you have any predictions for the future, because obviously right now the world is not in the happiest, may I use that word, loving, compassionate place.
You know what? I think about this a lot right now, and I don't know, I don't recall what book I read, but it was about 3 years ago. I wish I could remember the title. I can't. Maybe some of the listeners have read this book, but this gentleman argued that every 80 years we have a massive change in society globally. And he says we're due up next in 2028. So this could be leading into what she was talking about. But I think more importantly, a lot of the problems we're having now are the same kind of problems we've had during these changes in the past. And that is change is accelerating. People are nervous. So a lot of people want to kind of back into their safe space, whereas a lot of other people want to move forward. And so you have this, to use, for lack of a better term, we have the conservative and the liberal butting heads at this point, where a certain amount of people want to go forward and other people want to go back. And I think a lot of what's happening globally right now with a lot of authoritarian leaders and stuff worldwide is, I think it's the last gasp of what we've been through in the last 80 years, going into the next 80-year cycle. So I think there's a big change coming. And I personally, from my perspective, I think it's going to be positive. I think we have to get through this last gasp of the old order to move into the new order. Change is always painful. And so my prediction is, I think if we come back in 10 years, we're going to say, wow, it was tough, but we got through it. I hope I'm right.
Right. So when you say that people either want to go back or they want to go forward. So right now, are a lot of people wanting to go back, and that's why we're having this sort of tension?
That's what I believe, because, some people just never really like change. And I think that's why we see, a lot of when you talk about the people that say vote for some of these folks, they're the older people. They just want things to go back. The 60s were great. I just want to go back to the 60s. I just want to go back to the 70s. Well, the 60s and the 70s were okay, but, we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't have computers, and a lot of people died in car accidents because we didn't have safety features in our cars. And so a lot of things I don't think people would want to go back to, but they like the feel. They like the vibe of those days. And frankly, I did too. I mean, I loved growing up in the 70s. And it was, I wish my kids would have been able to experience the kind of childhood I had. They haven't, but they're probably going to say the same thing about their children someday.
It's fascinating to me that you have broken it down to the people who want to go back and the people who want to go forward. So let's look at the people who want to go forward. What percentage Do you have any idea of what percentage of the world wants to go forward, and where do they want to go forward to? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's about 70% of the people are wanting to move forward, and that kind of falls into a lot of the polling you see, where there's about 30% for hardcore go back kind of issues. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's just, I think there's a lot. Well, and this gets back to a question you asked earlier when I said I consider myself a polymath. Mm-hmm. And that is that we have, as a society, have driven everybody to specialize in everything. And I've been working on a paper, and I'm going to try to submit it to some academic journals, where I'm arguing that we need to train more people back into what we would call the classic liberal arts. Part of the reason I think a lot of people are unhappy is they're so over-specialized, hyper-specialized. For too long, companies have been saying, I need engineers. And universities say, great, we'll train engineers, but they have to take a philosophy class, and they have to take a music appreciation class. And over time, they said, no, that's not going to make them a better engineer. Just teach them engineering and don't worry about all that other stuff. Well, at that point, I think we lose part of what makes us human, which is appreciation for music and art and things outside of just being an engineer or being a business person or being a nurse or a doctor. And I think we need to bring that back. I think we need to really work harder, because with the advent of AI and stuff, now we need to think. Not so much do, because, hey, the AI can solve my simple engineering problem. Now I need to think, what's the real problem that the computer will never understand because they're not human? Mm-hmm. And so I've been really advocating lately on a return to liberal arts, and I think there are more people who are polymaths out there than realize they are, because they've never been given the chance to learn a lot of things and be proficient at a lot of things, because they've been, if I had stayed an accountant, I would probably be just ready to shoot myself now doing accounting every day for the rest of my life.
Right. Which is another question I had for you, which is, you found a way to make your life work, starting from whatever you said you were doing in the hospital. I can't remember now. It was before
Everything.
The script, the janitor stuff, right? Whatever. Yeah. Yes. And you found a way to make it work. You found a way to make your life work. And I assume a lot of that has to do with your love for learning and solving problems and et cetera. But is there something underneath that other than, I'm sure we're all aware how intelligent you are. You're capable of doing all these things. But there are a lot of intelligent people who don't have the drive. They don't have the will. They don't have, what word would you use, that keeps you moving forward? You have a love for learning, yes. But is there something deeper than that you feel keeps you moving forward? And can you share that so that other people can start to realize what they might do with their own lives to move forward?
Yeah, well, my wife says it's pathological, and maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but it works for me. And that is that I just feel, I grew up in the North Valley of Albuquerque. In the neighborhood I grew up in, I'm white, but it was about 98% Hispanic. And I saw, I got to experience a life that I probably otherwise wouldn't have experienced. My family, because my mom was a hospital administrator, we were relatively well off compared to all of my friends and stuff. And I could see how you could just become complacent. But I saw how hard all my neighbors' parents were working, and I had a bunch of, challenges, nothing serious. I definitely was more spoiled than most of my friends. But I could see that, you have to pick yourself up and you have to dust yourself off. You're going to have tons of failures. I've had as many failures as I've had successes in my life. And making the choice to just languish, to lock yourself in a dark room with a bottle of whiskey and just think why is the world picking on me, is too easy to do. But picking yourself up and saying, okay, that didn't work. I heard once that there was a gentleman, I think he was 98 years old, and he's a swimmer, and he's got like all the world records for swimming, and he's blind. And when he swims, he wears a helmet under his swimming cap. And part of what they were saying in the story that I heard about him was that he runs into the wall and then he turns around and he swims the other way. And it's like this attitude of, well, I might be blind, so I can't see where the wall is, but I'm not going to let it stop me from doing what I want to do and what I love. And so he swims and he bangs his head into the wall, turns around and goes the other direction. And I think that's kind of how I see my life is if I stopped every time I had a failure or a setback, I would just not be the person I am today. And there's a lot of people that will keep going, but there's a lot of people that just say, woe is me, and they give up. And I think that's too bad. And, you know, I hope that, like, your podcast can teach some people to say, you know what, life is not about everything just going on. When I was in college, I thought, well, you know, I'll get my college degree and then I'll graduate and I'll get a great job and I'll have a wife and kids and a big old house and everything. I'll never have a problem again the rest of my life. Well, my life has been a never-ending struggle of running into problems and trying to find a way out of it. And so I think that's, you know, I think that's part of it.
Wonderful answer. I really do what you love, realize that you're going to have failures, but don't let that stop you because you find a way out of it. And that's really, I'm glad you said that. Someone as accomplished as you are, because people don't realize that failure is just part, it's like, what is lessons learned, is it what they say in the corporate world, right? Risk management, lessons learned, etc. Okay, I have another thing I want to ask. Unless, did you want to say something?
No, I go ahead and ask away.
Okay, so I know that you're living here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'm also broadcasting from, and I've lived here for 35 years, and there's this wonderful magazine called Trend, Art, Design, and Culture. Isn't it a national magazine also, have won a lot of awards, etc.? Could you talk a little bit about that, and the fact that you have now taken on a new adventure is...
Yes, another new adventure. I have a software company, and I actually started an academic journal called the International Journal of Innovation Science, which is a very successful journal. I started that in 2007. Started it from scratch, and I've been the editor-in-chief, and recently, because we receive about 600 or 700 submissions a year, I let a young guy take over the editor-in-chief job. When I came to Santa Fe, I thought, I'm going to retire. You know, I'm going to enjoy the mountains. I'm going to go fishing more. Well, that hasn't really worked out that way. So when the publisher, Cynthia Canyon, came to me and said, you know, I know you've been an editor, but you've never done this kind of magazine. I said, well, once again, here's a new challenge for me. And in the case of the magazine, it wasn't about earning money. That wasn't the point of it. The point was, this gives me an entree into meeting a lot of people around Santa Fe that actually are creative and refreshing. I'm not going to mention where I lived last time, but many places before and I grew up in Albuquerque, so I'm coming back to New Mexico. But so many places that I've lived, I refer to our friends as country club friends. You know, what kind of car do you drive? How big's your house? What neighborhood do you live in, and everything, which wasn't bad. I mean, I have no gripes about that. But coming back to Santa Fe, Trend was perfect because we talk about interesting people, we talk about interesting restaurants, we talk about places to go, the landscape, what it is that makes people love northern New Mexico the way they do. And for your listeners, if you haven't ever been to northern New Mexico, this is really one of those special places between Taos and Santa Fe. You know, if you're somebody that believes in vibrations and feeling, I don't have to explain it to you, Sandra, but other people, they come here and they think there's something about the place, the light, the food, the colors is just different than any place else. So taking over as editor of Trend, gave me the opportunity to start looking at northern New Mexico in a way that I've never looked at it before. Obviously as a kid, I didn't appreciate growing up here. As an adult and coming back, I look around and I see things that I never noticed before. And then with the magazine, I'm actually digging deep into these stories about places and people and history. The history is amazing. My house was built in 1904, and I keep thinking, there was probably horses and carriages on my street when my house was built. And so digging into the history is just, one more opportunity to learn things that I never knew before. And as I keep saying, that just brings me a lot of joy to think about those things, to learn those things, to be digging my yard and finding tools from the 1800s that are buried in the dirt, that are all rusted out, and going, the lives of the people who must have been through my home. And I do know that in the 70s, my house was a rental, and I've heard from at least a dozen people who have lived here long term that my house was the big party house back in the 70s. Apparently everybody did drugs in my house. And so, it's a house that people have enjoyed living in over the years.
Join Sandra M. for her live performance of the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow, a toast to love and happiness in life, an uninhibited musical adventure guaranteed to awaken your happiness vibe. Celebrate with upbeat rhythms, love songs, and fun stories, some told by you in the audience. Sandra's musical guest and accompanist, Todd Lowry, sings his hopeful and happy originals. To book Sandra M. and the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow, email sandra@sandramcknight.com. Celebrate happiness with Sandra M.
That's fascinating. And so we come around to being a lifelong learner, to being a creative person, because I immediately associate creativity with innovation and with imagination and solving problems, all the things that you seem to be an expert in doing. So when you come back to Santa Fe is known for creativity, I do believe, right? And aren't we the oldest city in the country?
The oldest capital city for sure. Mm-hmm. But they trace the city back to 1603, 1604. And we have the oldest church there on, I've forgotten which, Paseo de Peralta, is that it? Yes. The oldest church is on Santa Fe Trail.
Santa Fe Trail, right.
Right outside of downtown, but close to the street you mentioned. We have the oldest house. And, if anybody visits Santa Fe, you got to go on one of the ghost tours or something, because it's interesting. We have a wonderful independent bookstore down there, and there's a plaque on the edge of the bookstore that said that's where at one point they had jailed Billy the Kid before he escaped and went off. I don't know if you've ever seen that plaque, but, it's Billy the Kid. I mean, come on. By Collected Works Bookstore.
Yes. How fantastic. So you're just following along what you've been doing all your life, is creating and learning and developing. And I find you a fascinating guest. So many wonderful ideas that you brought forward. And I don't know that I could go on asking more questions, but one of the things that you said, going back to people like to go back because they, not so much that they remember all the things that maybe didn't work in the past as they're going backwards, but they like the feel or the vibe. They remember the feel or the vibe. Why do people remember, in your mind, why do people remember the feel and the vibe, but not so much maybe the things that didn't work when they were in the 70s and 80s?
I think it's I'm sorry, Sandra. I think it's a coping mechanism. I think we tend to block out the things that were bad. We see it all the time. Were my parents perfect? If I really think about it, no. But if I don't think about it that hard, they were the perfect parents. Everything was great. My childhood was wonderful. I forget about the fights. I forget about the bad grades. I forget, I just block those things out. And so I think we as human beings, as a coping mechanism, as a survival thing, we try to block out the bad things and only remember the good things. How many times have you gone and said, well, there's this great restaurant and, I grew up in this town that we had this great restaurant. You go back to the town. Well, the town's a lot smaller than you remember. The people aren't as nice as you remember. You go to that restaurant that you loved when you were younger and you go, this isn't a very good restaurant. But the nostalgia of it is, I think, that's what we do. We just seem to remember it. And as I had mentioned, it's like, okay, you want to go back to the 60s, give me your cell phone back. Oh, no, I can't give you my cell phone. I love my cell phone. Well, okay, but they didn't have those in the 60s. And so, we can look back fondly on it, but sometimes I think it wasn't as good as we remember. And we got a lot of really great things today. I mean, I always tell my kids when I was young and we drive between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, about every 2 miles you had a broken down car. You don't have broken down cars next to the freeway very often anymore. Tires are better, cars are more reliable. Do you really want to go back to driving that 1965 Corvair or whatever you were driving? I don't think so.
So are you thinking that people actually I follow this man named Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've worked with him for a long time now, and he is always saying that people live in the past a great deal. And when things get worse in their present, they go back as far as they can into the past, which is basically what you were saying too, right? People want to go back. They don't want to go forward. And so, or they take the past and they try to put it into the future. So they're saying, okay, these things worked in the past. I had a good vibe on this or that. So let's bring that into the future. Let's go forward with that. Rather than living in the present, and I'm interested in your mind and your opinions on what it means to be living in the present and solving issues that are in the present, right? Learning new ways of going forward as opposed to taking the things from the past that maybe did or didn't work and trying to pull them into the future.
Well, if I got this right, so experience in doing things and trying things. I had a real world situation the other day. I had a problem and I couldn't figure out how to solve it. I just couldn't figure out how to solve it. I lost sleep for 1.5 nights. And the second night, the solution just came to me out of nowhere. And then I actually went on to ChatGPT and said, what do you think of this? And it said, well, you've optimized your solution. Now, whether AI is actually all that, it gave me the opportunity to confirm that that had been a problem for a couple of nights where I lost sleep was actually the right solution. So, did I answer that?
Well, I don't know. I think I was asking a huge question. I was just asking, being in the present, and maybe these will be your the final thoughts that you might want to leave for our listeners because we're coming to the end of our time together. But being in the present, as opposed to always it's not a question of experience, it's just a question, oh, I really like that, I felt good about that, so let's try and bring that into the present, which might not even be, as you say, we don't want to give up our cell phones, right? We have to live in the present, and we have to deal with the problems we have here and create where we're going for the future. Or where we're moving forward, as you said. 70% of the people want to move forward, right, is what you mentioned. So, okay, if we're always dragging everything from the past, we're not going to be able to move that well into the future with new ideas, new ways of living.
You know what? I know what I was trying to say.
Okay.
So I do part-time kind of, go to yoga. I spent a lot of years going to a lot of yoga. And one of the things they teach you in yoga is during when you're doing your yoga practice is to let go of the things that you might have brought in and not to worry about the things that are going to happen tomorrow. You might be able to do something about tomorrow, thinking through a problem or something like that. But the important thing is leaving the past behind. There's nothing you can do to change the past. And I think we talked about that earlier, was people who just, curl up in a ball and drink and turn off the lights and there's nothing you can do. What's already happened. What are you going to do about it now? And being in the present is allowing you to actually think about the current situation, and how does that exactly fit right now? Saying, gosh, I lost my job. I'm never going to be able to retire in 30 years. Well, you got plenty of time to redo your retirement account and get things back on track. But people will focus on that, and they'll focus on 30 years in the future, and they'll refuse to allow themselves to be happy by thinking about, wow, like right now I'm sitting in my studio and the sun is still shining, even though we're going to have a winter storm tomorrow. For the listeners who want to figure out whereabouts we're at, this is the storm that's going to be blowing through the south and everything here in the winter of 2026 during the third week of January. But right now it's nice out. It's beautiful, and I'm enjoying the moment. I'm not worrying about the fact that it's going to snow tomorrow night at this point. So being present and appreciating the way things are right now is great. And tomorrow night when it's snowing, I'm going to put a fire in the fireplace, and I'm going to appreciate that it's snowing and I've got a warm house and I've got a fireplace.
Yes.
And that will be in that moment.
Thank you so much for being on, sharing your thoughts about happiness and about innovation and about learning and being in the present. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra.
Declutter. Decluttering sounds like a big project, but setting aside just 20 minutes a week can have a big impact. Set your timer. Take 15 minutes to tidy up a specific area of one room, your closet, for example, or toss or give away what is no longer useful. Create a giveaway box.
In the last 5 minutes, take a quick walk through your living space and put away whatever stray items end up in your path. Do this once a day, once a week, or when you feel your space is out of control.
Newsflash, please sign up for your copy of our Keys to Happiness at sandramcknight.com. Thank you for tuning into Season 3 of the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow podcast. And if you enjoyed the conversation, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family. And don't forget to catch up on any episodes from Seasons 1 and 2 that you might have missed. Before we go, I'd like to thank today's guest, Brett Trusko, for sharing his happiness story. And to share your happiness story on the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow podcast, send an email to sandra@sandramcknight.com.
Turn your smile on, you can't go wrong. You'll find that love is all around. Follow your bliss, no one is against you.